Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Fountain of Life podcast. Thank you for having joined us throughout our last series of episodes on the subject of fear. We want to move on to something new, something that is going to lift us up and encourage us. I'm sure you might have heard colleagues or family people, or even you yourself, talk about how you are not appreciated, and magnify maybe your weaknesses, and talk about how maybe you are not enough and all of that. It would have ended there, just words, if that were the case. But usually, the things that we tell ourselves impacts our well-being, impacts us in so many ways. So for the next series of episodes, we want to just look at the effect of the stories that we tell ourselves.
Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. Worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of you restore my soul.
This is your host, Charles Zuta, and I welcome you to today's episode. In so many ways, we all have stories that we tell ourselves, or stories that we tell others. They will just be stories if they didn't impact us in so many ways. But the truth is, the stories that we tell ourselves impacts our well-being. It shapes us in so many ways. It may place barriers in our way if it's a negative story, and if it's a positive story, it can uplift us. So it's important that we are aware of the stories that we tell ourselves. We'll be referring to some biblical examples to see the impact of the stories that we tell ourselves on our destiny, on our future, and in so many ways, both positive and then negatively. So it is very, very important that we understand this subject and use it to shape a better narrative about our lives and empower ourselves to be able to be the best that God has created us to be. So continue to listen to these episodes as we explore this subject, the stories that we tell ourselves. We want to begin from a point that really we can all relate with. And I'm talking about the story of the creation of man. That is the book of Genesis. So if you go to Genesis chapter 1, from verse 26, we all know the creation story. But how that ties in to what we say is what I want us to explore in the next few minutes. So God had a plan to rehabilitate the earth. We don't know how long the earth has been chaotic, void, and darkness was upon it. But at some point, God decided to do something about the earth. He created plants, animals, and everything to get going. Then he decided to do something. Create a being to dominate all of that. Somebody that looks like him, will operate like him, and be the one who will take charge of everything that he's making. So in verse 26, God began this process with a thought and then with a saying. This is what he said, verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our own image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." At this point, man doesn't exist. He only exists in God's thoughts. But as you can see, God told himself a story. He said, this is the blueprint. This is the man that I want to make. I'm going to make a being that doesn't exist yet. And I want that person to take my identity, be like me, be in my image, both physically and spiritually. So it says image and likeness. You see, image and likeness. So if God shows up among us, it's not going to look like a crow, or it's not going to look like a vulture. It's going to look like us. So he said, I'll make the man in our image and our likeness. So God told himself a story. This is what I want to do, and this is how I want this person to operate. He should have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God had a story, and whoever his audience was, as he was saying this, the mother began to visualize this being. Okay, verse 27 says, so God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So everything that God created, everything that we are seeing today, man's ability to dominate the earth. We go to space, we go to the deepest parts of the ocean, we do all of it. Even sometimes when we are abusing the earth, God built that into man. He created those abilities in us. But it all started with a story that he told himself. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to be in existence. So the things that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves can be creative because it shapes our worldview. If you keep telling yourself, I'm not good enough, it places a limitation on your ability to be good. If you keep telling yourself, nobody likes me, it inhibits your ability to make friends because what you see in yourself, you project it, and everybody begins to see you may be the most pleasant person around. But if you have told yourself that nobody likes you, it comes out of you. It radiates when you are in the midst of people. You are always self-conscious and all of that. So it matters what we tell ourselves. Of course, there are extreme cases where people believe they can do everything. That is all right. At least it motivates them to do something. So whether the story you're telling yourself is negative or is positive, it can be creative. It has the ability to shape your worldview. It has the ability to shape your attitude. It has the ability to shape a lot of things about you, and ultimately how you carry yourself or how you perform. So we've seen God do it. God used words. Everything that he made, he spoke words into being. But we are seeing a bit more detail here when it came to man, that God told himself a story. He read a certain blueprint about man's ability, and he said it to people, the angels, and they all witnessed as man came into being. So it matters what you tell yourself, because words are creative. They shape us and they influence us. Now let us look at a very interesting story, once again, in the New Testament about how this applies to everyday things that we do as people and why it matters, the kind of story that we tell ourselves. Go with me to the book of Luke. Jesus was preaching, telling people about the kingdom of heaven and everything, about how they should confess him before man and God and all of that. A very different subject matter altogether. Talking about Luke chapter 12 from the verse 8. Then just out of the blue, somebody in the crowd shouts, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. I mean, if you are a public speaker in any capacity and you are speaking to an audience on a particular subject, and then somebody just gets up, and then he shouts something that is totally unrelated to what you are talking about, that can be very unsettling. So I can imagine how Jesus felt when this person blurted out this. So Jesus had to stop what he was teaching and address this issue. So verse 14, Bible says, but he said to him, but he being Jesus, and him being the person who shouted this, man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? I mean, I could sense Jesus' wrath and his discomfort at this rude interruption. But he had to play nice. He had to address the issue anyhow. So he said, look, guy, who made me, an arbitrator over you? If you have an issue with your brother, that is not what I'm here for. I'm talking about something different. But you listen to this anyhow. So he said to them, take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life doesn't consist of the abundance of the things he possesses. So Jesus took the opportunity to give this man and his audience, a lesson about the need to not be covetous, to be greedy. Because obviously his brother, whatever inheritance they had, his brother wasn't in the mood to share anything with him. So Jesus is saying, look, yeah, your brother is not doing what is right, because realistically, a man's life doesn't consist of the abundance of the things he has. There are more important things in life than taking all the inheritance and not giving your brother any. Of course, we don't know whether his brother was in the audience, but Jesus was teaching this person a lesson about what is important in life, the priorities that we have or we should have in life relative to things. Then Jesus goes on, as his manner is, to give an example of what he meant by our life doesn't consist of the abundance of things that we have. Verse 16. So the Bible says, then he spoke a parable to them being his audience, including this man who brought up this digression. He said to a parable saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself. Note that phrase. He thought within himself. A saying. So he didn't just think within himself. He also said something. Let us see what he said. What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, note that word again. So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things to be which you have provided? Verse 21. So is he who lays up treasure for himself, is not rich and is not rich towards God. So here we find a whole sermon built around one interruption that Jesus had. This man screaming, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. So the lesson that I want us to focus on relative to our theme that we are looking at, the stories that we tell ourselves, is how this rich man, the Bible writers describe him as the rich fool. So this parable is called the parable of the rich fool. So Jesus told them this parable about a rich man whose ground yielded plentifully. He had a bumper harvest. And he looked at his farm and realized that, you know what, I have nowhere to store all this produce. So what I will do is that I will pull down my old barns, my silos, and then build a new one to store up my goods and my crops. Brilliant idea. Really, really fascinating. Okay. But then he goes a step further and tells himself another story. And that is what Jesus is trying to point out about we laying up treasure for ourselves and not being rich towards God. So this man told himself, he told his soul. Our soul is our will, our intellect, our conscience, and all of those parts of us. We can't touch them, but that is what makes us who we are. Okay, and the soul really won't die. It continues even after death, whether the soul of the righteous person or the soul of the sinner. So the soul is more like your footprint on this earth. Everything that you have done is documented in there. So if God wants to judge us, it's our soul. That is why the soul is so important. The body rots, the spirit goes back to God. The soul is you, the real you. So this man told his soul, literally he told himself, the real person, whoever he is, his will, his emotions, his plans, his everything. He addressed himself and he said, look, relax. I've so much laid out for you for many years. Eat, drink, relax. Enjoy life. We enjoy today, for tomorrow we die. We hear that said. This guy told himself that. So for him, it is here and now. And it's a story that he told himself. This story affects his destiny. It's not looking beyond here. Here being our life here as mortals. All it does, the story he told himself, is totally inadequate for his destiny as a person. All he said is, I have so much laid out and it's all here and now. Let me just enjoy life. Eat, drink, and be merry. His vision doesn't extend beyond here. Of course, Jesus put this narrative in this man's life. He could have put it in the mouth of a preacher, a priest or other people. But he put it in the mouth of an ordinary person. And the truth of the matter is that this is in an era where they had the laws, they had religion, they had everything. But in this story, this man told himself, it makes no room for God. It is just him and himself. And that is a tragedy. Whatever his destiny is, it is up to God to judge. We are not judged. But the trouble is that whatever the story he was telling himself was a story that was detrimental to his well-being. So God called him a fool. God said, fool, tonight your soul will be required of you. And so all the things that you've laid up, whose are they going to be? You see, there are a lot of people in our world today who have built these narratives about themselves. It is all about here and now. If you talk about Christ or talk about church, they scoff because they can't see beyond that. One thing that I also want to point out is this. God never said anything was wrong with the fact that his ground yielded plentiful. There's nothing wrong with that. Jesus never condemned that. Or the fact that he said he's going to build a bigger silo to store his goods. Brilliant idea. But he became a fool when he told himself a story that will lead to his destruction. There are many people today who are sitting in very difficult circumstances, whether be it in prison or they've lost their lives or other things because of the stories that they told themselves. When somebody is going to commit a crime, they usually tell themselves a story. I can break into this house, nobody will see me, I'll take this. But they plan all those things. They go do it, they get caught in their life. Either they lose their lives or they lose their freedom. Every action that we take begins with a story. We tell ourselves something. This example Jesus put this story in this man's life. There's nothing wrong with his failed yielding. So God is not after us because we are working hard. He's not after us because we are doing well in life. He's not after us that we are making plans to take care of the things that he has blessed us with. God is not after us with those things. After all, as we saw in the book of Genesis, he blessed man. He asked him to go, be fruitful, be multiply, and all of that. So God is not after us with those things. It is the narrative we build for ourselves around those things that matters. The things that we tell ourselves regarding those things that he's blessed us with. That is what matters. If God gives you $1 million or God blesses you with so much, God is not afraid of you using it. But he has principles, he has values, he has rules that he wants us to employ in all those things that he blesses us with. So for this young man, or whoever he is, he told his soul, himself, the real him, that look, relax. There's so much laid out for you. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. What he didn't know was that night he was going to die. And the question is, where will his soul be? And besides, after putting all the effort in commanding this wealth and taking care of it, whose is he going to be? What are his priorities in this life? The stories that we tell ourselves, whether with things, with the life that God has given us, with everything, it matters to God. It will be stories that are wise in God's perspective, or stories that God will consider that this is foolish in every way. I'm going to pause here and we'll look at another example of the effect of the stories that we tell ourselves. We are seeing here a negative story where the person is so short-sighted, he doesn't see beyond tomorrow. He's just here and now. And that is sometimes the hedonistic philosophy. There is no tomorrow. We just have to have just pleasure here and now and nothing beyond here. That story, if you tell yourself that story, God considers it as foolish. Because the Bible says that so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. So ultimately, the story that we tell ourselves with the things that he gave to us or the things that he brings under our control should be things that will help us to also be rich towards God. If this man had told himself something that connects him to God with all the blessings that he has, maybe God will not have called him a fool. So what story do we tell ourselves as we look at this material world? What story do we tell ourselves as we look at the things that God has brought under our control? It is very, very important. God considers it wise, or God considers it foolish. It is totally up to us, and we can change that narrative to bring God into the focus of that narrative or that story that we tell ourselves. Child of God, God told himself a story and he created man, and it has gone on for perpetuity until the day God wraps up this earth. It all began with what God told us. And we are seeing a classic example of how if we tell ourselves a wrong story, it can shape our destiny. It can shape our future. Pick it up from here, God willing, in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me. And let's connect again as we look at the stories that we tell ourselves, using some of these biblical examples to learn vital lessons about the value of telling yourself a good story. By the way, if you don't subscribe to this episode, I encourage you to share the link with your friends. You can hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And also let us hear your comments or feedback. If these discussions we are having has been a blessing to you, let us know. We appreciate your feedback. And then also you can download this episode on Spotify, Amazon, Google, and all the places where you get your podcast. Thank you so much, and may God richly bless you.
Fountain of my life, I worship you today. Lord, only you
The book of Matthew 11:28-29. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest